Hi there, good afternoon. This live is going to be talking about retail and profitability. As much as I like talking about the retail environment, retail atmospheres, and the customer experience in the retail atmosphere, I felt that it's important also to concentrate on the profitability of retail and retailing. And in this omni-channel context, most retailers are divesting their businesses into several formats and several services. It's becoming a little bit complicated to understand where the profit is coming from or what are the formats that could help the brand become more profitable and others not. But I'm going to be discussing all of this with Alvin today. I'm not going to, as usual, introduce you to my guest because I leave it up to him and her naturally to do that during the live. So I'm going to be connecting with Alvin, whom I believe is connecting from Germany. It's live with the topic of retail and profitability. Hi, Alvin.
Hello, Ghalia. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome to your first Instagram live.
Wow, my first co-Instagram live. I do lives. I haven't done it like this ever, so I'm pretty excited. Thank you for having me.
Me too. I'm so happy that we're doing this. And Alvin, I generally kick off the live by giving you the floor because I did not do an introduction about you or why we're doing this live solely today about retail and profitability. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Alvin?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I am the retail business coach that helps independent retailers improve their cash flow and profitability. So that leads on to the question to how did I get here? So I used to live in Melbourne, Australia, and I actually was trained as a pharmacist. I guess I still am a pharmacist. And I used to buy and sell large pharmacy-based businesses in Melbourne, Australia. And pharmacies in Melbourne, Australia, in Australia in general, predominantly are very, very similar to the US model, and they generally contain a large component of retail. So I was always in retail for that period of time, and buying and selling businesses. And I was working with coaches and mentors who were, who I was learning how to do these things from.
Yeah.
Because when I first got into business, I was very young. I was 27 years old. And I was a little bit impatient because, when you're a kid, effectively, all you really want to do is just make money. And so I quickly sought help. With the help of coaches and mentors, I was able to understand how to grow businesses really quickly, how important it was to focus on cash flow and profitability from day one, and also how to ensure that the business runs without you. So these were always my focuses when I was running my businesses. And then, fast forward 16 years later, I bought and sold 5 or 6 large shops. The pandemic came, and we were living in Melbourne, Australia. And my wife and I, we decided, it's a good time to leave Melbourne. It had, quite a few severe restrictions in place, during the pandemic. And we thought that was not for us. So we moved to Germany. She's from Germany. So I sold my business. She quit her job. We moved to Germany. And when I sold that business, I was working with a coach at the time. And my business coach, Glenn, was like, Alvin, what are you going to do next? And I was like, I have no idea. I'll probably buy a business when I get to Germany, not a pharmacy business because of the licensing issues, but, I'll find something to do online. And, we had another conversation and he was like, you'd be really good in helping other business owners as well because of all the stuff that you've done. And apparently I was a good client because I was listening to everything he was saying. So he convinced me, Glenn convinced me to do that. So here I am. I now help other retail business owners to improve their cash flow and profitability. I specialize in cash flow and profitability because it's often very unsexy. However, it is the sort of the fundamentals that I believe, and this is what my experience was in running businesses if you're an independent operator. Once you get your cash flow and profitability sorted, then you can really start to ramp up, other parts of your business. So that was a
Right.
very long answer to your question. I apologize.
No, it's really interesting. And whilst listening to you talking about that, I was curious, I think, and everyone is curious to understand, if you're coming from a pharmaceutical background, how can we detach the idea of working in that industry with the retail business model and how it could apply to any other industry? So I believe that,
Absolutely.
yeah, this is important to clarify since the beginning, if we can.
100%, 100%. So yes, like you mentioned, I am a pharmacist, and pharmacy businesses in Australia are predominantly retail-based businesses. So the fundamentals of retailing, as you know, are pretty much the same everywhere. And,
Right.
you need to ensure that you're managing your stock. You've got a really good customer service team. You've got to make sure your promotions are all up to date. You're actively working towards that market and, making sure that your offer is relevant to your community, in my case, which was the local demographic. So, with the help of coaches, I was taught very early on that I needed to work on my business and not in it. And what that meant was I had to remove myself from the day-to-day of being a scientist or practitioner with patients.
Right.
So I only did very little of that. And so by being able to step back and work on growing the business and getting out of the day-to-day, that's where I got a lot of my experience. That's what allowed me to buy and sell because, I wasn't really much of a clinician as such.
Right. And Alvin, another question before hitting into the core of the subject is a term that I find very important
Uh-huh.
and that you seem to stress on a lot, which is detaching ourselves from our business. How
Mm.
important is that? And what is the value of detaching ourselves from a business that we have created or we have been running for such a long time?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it's a question that, certainly when I work with clients and when it was first impressed upon me, it's not something as an independent business owner you think about because, in my case and in many other retail business owners' cases, we either come from a technician background and we want to be in it all the time. And that means, selling on the floor, doing the rostering, implementing all the promotions, doing all the marketing, etc. But what was impressed very early on for me was if I wanted to grow these businesses, it's important to take a step back and really just work on the high level stuff. And so, you want to work on the business and focus on the growth aspects of the business. And it really boils back to you as the business owner understanding what you want and what this business can provide for you. And so that's one of the first steps I do when I work with my clients. That's what my coaches did with me is like understanding where do you want to be 3 years, 5 years, what really excites you, what are your values, and then using the business as a vehicle to ensure that we fulfill those needs for you.
All right. Later on, we're going to be stressing on the differences between managing a smaller business or a fully operational business and to see how we can modulate through those. Alvin,
Absolutely.
you stress also on the business being profitable and increasing its cash flow. But
Yeah.
first and foremost, what's the difference between profitability and cash flow?
Yes, it's a really good question, and it is a concept that is often forgotten or misunderstood. Okay, so cash flow. When I refer to cash flow, I refer to the amount of free cash in your business. So basically, from in our retail game that we play, if we are constantly buying stock and without selling it in reasonable amounts of time, our cash is going to be tied up in that stock. So when I talk about cash flow, I'm talking about free cash that is available in our bank account. And as a business owner, it's really important because that free cash is what you use to pay your team, pay your suppliers, and most importantly, pay yourself.
Right.
Now, when we talk about profitability, in a sense, is a theoretical term, and it's, you probably heard your accountant or perhaps your bookkeeper talk about how much profit that you've made. You've bought something, it has a cost price, and there's a sell price that you're selling it for. That gap in between is your profit figure. So profitability is really important more than just a number metric. It also signifies how well your business is doing. And, you know, more importantly, when I work with clients, it also helps drive the value of the business. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of a sense of the difference between cash flow. And I just like to think of cash as free cash in the bank account, and profit is how much money we're making. And it's more of a theoretical figure, but very necessarily important.
Right. Okay. We'll be getting into that mathematical thing that we all hate.
Yeah, that's right.
Today, if we're going to be looking at the retail and the retail format, we can see that there are different types of retail formats that are available on the market, whether it was the traditional supermarket or boutique, or maybe the new dark stores that have emerged a lot after the pandemic, or ephemeral types of stores like the pop-up stores that we see.
Yes.
My question is, how would or could we understand if we have several formats that belong to our business, that each one is profitable? Is profitability something holistic that a brand should calculate, or is it directly related to one format at a time?
That's a really good question, because as you mentioned, a lot of retailers are going down that omni-channel approach, and so they should. So, you know, if I'm looking at it, you definitely want to ensure that there is group profitability, but I would also want to ensure that each business unit as such, for instance, the dark store, the pop-up store, perhaps your e-commerce division, I really believe that each business unit should be profitable on its own. And, you know, it should be a standalone, not business entity, but it should be sort of paying and running for itself. Now, in the beginning, that may not be possible. You certainly are going to be using funds from perhaps the main retail storefront to, you know, carry the other division, obviously. But I still believe that we need to really assess each business unit separately.
Okay, and when we're talking about that, are there different managers who will be looking at their profitability with different metrics or measures? I don't know if that exists, but we look at managers fighting together, each one within his or her own retail format, and looking at different metrics to assess whether this format is profitable or not. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are making sense. And yes, this is a common thing that I do notice. I notice this with the larger retailers as well. And you're right, you've got certain business units fighting each other. So here's the thing. I think it's really important for the business owner, to know exactly what profitability means to them. So you might have a different business division where you've got your main retail floor and you're aiming for a certain level of profit margins and profitability to ensure your survival, right? And obviously that you're making money and you're paying your team and your suppliers. And the main thing I always stress is you're paying your owners. So that's the one division. However, many retailers have a separate division, and they might sacrifice a little bit of margin for the growth of that division. And for example, a couple of clients I deal with, they have an e-commerce division attached to their retail shop. And, there is a perception in the marketplace that if you're in e-commerce, your margins are going to be lower because people can search your prices, etc. So, there are definitely retailers who have a different margin when they sell online versus in-store. And I think it's just because of that business model that you need to understand that there are going to be different margins. There could be different margins for different divisions.
Right. So when we're talking about a business model, Alvin, does everyone read that definition in the same way, or does
no? So, not at all.
So how can we demystify that term, because it's very general?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, different people have different versions of cash flow. When I talk about a cash flow statement, it means totally different to what the accountant would call a cash flow statement or a bookkeeper. How do we demystify this? I'm not sure, but if I were to guess, I think it's about being really, really clear on what profit margin means to you as a business. And I think if we all are coming from the top with a clear definition, and that'll filter its way down. And obviously, as you know, that influences our actions, our marketing actions, and what happens on a store level. So, just the basics, taking a few steps back, understanding what's important to us, and that can drive everything forward from there.
Okay, so if we want to look now at a business individually, and we're coming to you or we're coming to our manager who works internally on that profitability issue, what are the steps that we should take from now on to ensure that we have a smooth running model that will hopefully yield those positive returns?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is another thing in our retail game that as individual independent retail owners, we often forget this. And it's really simple. And I'm so surprised that not a lot of retailers have this as part of their process. But I think it's really important to ensure that we are making a margin, right? So we really want to, what I call, conduct a profit analysis in our business. And, what I recommend clients or businesses do is to understand their profit margins on a weekly basis. And it's just a really simple process of having a look at what we sold the last trading week and making sure that hopefully your point of sale system can break it down by category and subcategory. And just looking at the overall margin that we're making, ensuring that one, it fits our requirements, and two, it fits our model that we're operating in, whether we're in a discount model or the clothing model, making sure that our margins are fair and where they need to be. And it's that weekly analysis, and then from there you can start to adjust your pricing accordingly in your margins. And I think that's often overlooked, is a lot of retailers don't really do that. They just walk through sale by sale every week without really sitting down to look at their margins.
So are we doing a mistake by suggesting that if we want to have a winning model, we should adopt a winning model from another competitor brand?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Oh my God.
I'm thinking, what should I do? Like, you're talking and explaining about this, and I'm seeing myself confronted to those issues. But it's really interesting that we tend sometimes to evaluate our business and ourselves based on others. So there's a leak somewhere in the business. Is it the fact that we're looking only at profitability and not maybe having a look around our losses or an area that is leaking our profit? Is there something like that businesses look at generally?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, by looking at your profits, like you mentioned, and looking at your margins on a weekly basis, you can start to get an understanding of where the money is leaking in your business, right? So that's one part of it, because if you're, the thing I see all the time, and I used to make the same mistake, is I was selling products and services at a really low margin. And it was basically because I never looked at them, or, people never look at them, or, we're trying to compete, retailers are trying to compete with other retailers on price, without fully understanding the other retailers' business model and without fully understanding our own. So getting your head around margins is really, really important. The next thing is, I think as independent business owners, is getting a grip on our expenses. I think expenses are often overlooked. And, just getting into a system of optimizing our expenses and, from an independent retail setting, ensuring that our labor costs are in line with our gross sales, basically. And there's a metric for each different industry that I would encourage you to look up and try and benchmark yourself against. And also, I think the last thing is most retailers don't really have a system for optimizing their expenses. I mean, as an independent business owner, you're quite often too busy running around, trying to figure out the roster, putting out fires and stuff, and not really taking the time to sit down and go through our numbers. And it's amazing what having a system and just having a 0.5% or 1% incremental decrease in our expenses can have on our bottom line.
Okay. I want to ask whether increasing prices or revisiting our prices is always the solution for our profitability. I see lots of retailers whom I work with directly having this reaction to an action. Okay, we're not doing fine, we're not making a lot of money, let's increase our prices. Does the price really stands between our business's health and profitability?
Price is one component. You know, we need to look at price, we need to look at our operating expenses, and we need to look at our cash flow. I think, yes, there is an often reactionary aspect to raising our prices, right? When we're in a funk in our business. You know, I think we need to, you definitely need to have a systematic approach to increasing your prices. And it's about understanding what products and services you're offering to the market, what products and services, KVIs are known value items that people know the price of. You know, for instance, they might know a price of a pencil, for instance, and in the marketplace, everybody knows that you can't increase the price on that. So, you know, there's no point touching that because you won't sell any of it. But certainly by understanding your suite of product and services, and of course, who you are serving in the marketplace, right? I think that's really important. We often forget our target clients.
Yeah.
We're trying to be everything to everybody because the shop down the road is doing the same thing. But I think by truly understanding who we're serving, and then we can start to, manipulate or massage our pricing accordingly. Now, like I mentioned, there's also the expense component as well, and optimizing for cash flow. So it's not a simple aspect of just raising your prices across the board.
Right. And for a person who really likes working with numbers, what about the brand's value or the sentimental value and its relationship to price and profitability?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? I mean, if we look at some of the really big houses like Versace, Louis Vuitton, they've got this down really pat. So I think as a business owner, I think it's about realizing what value we have to the marketplace, you know, and what perception we can create, and really not kidding ourselves whether this is a premium product where we can massage the margin up, right? So I think it's about understanding that and your marketplace before you start moving the prices up like that.
Right. So like listening to our conversation, we really have to go back to basics and just follow like basic rules of understanding who we are, where we are in that market, and whom we are competing with before just like throwing ourselves into actions or reactions related to our price or changes.
Exactly. And I would love to just harp on that a little bit because, you know, in the economy that we're in now, everyone's after the greatest solution. And I think this is everyone's after the greatest marketing aspect and jumping onto the next marketing campaign and trying all these fun, really cool things. But really, like what I'm talking about is just basic fundamentals. It's not rocket science, but it's quite often forgotten because we're too busy chasing the shiny rabbit.
Right. Well said. And Alvin, what are the elements that businesses should have to ensure the right route towards profitability? Now, I know that we have been talking about the same things. Let's start consolidating those elements to provide our audience like with key understanding of what they should do and how best they should do it.
Absolutely. So you know, what I was always taught and what worked really well for me and what I've been doing for a long time and what I work with my clients is we work on 3 areas of your business. 3.5. The first thing is we get your mindset right, you know, is trying to get a deep understanding of what this business is going to provide for you, because it's through understanding what we want, our values, our wants and our desires, that's really going to motivate us forward. But then once we get to the nitty gritty, it's understand the visibility of the numbers in our business. So making sure that we have some system set up so that we can understand what the numbers are in our business. The next thing is we really work on cash flow and trying to flush the bank account with cash, because that's really, really important for any business, let alone definitely a retail business. And the third component is the profit component. So really working to improve our profit and having a system for managing our profit. So, you know, those are the 3.5 steps that I would encourage every business owner, and, you know, more so retail, because, you know, retailers are my kind of people, to look at in their business.
Okay. So we talked at the beginning about having like entrepreneurs who are kicking off with their businesses and always struggling with numbers and profitability,
Yeah.
and bigger retailers looking at enhancing their profitability. What are your recommendations, first of all, to entrepreneurs who are looking at kicking off their business and maybe going into that positive slope of profitability?
Absolutely. So what I recommend is having an understanding of the numbers in your business, like we spoke about visibility. But I think the key thing here is, as business owners, we tend to overcomplicate it. And maybe this is our perception of numbers and we get really scared and, we just overcomplicate it. So what I recommend is we just keep things really, really simple. We just start to track our cash flow very simply using a spreadsheet. We start determining some key set of KPIs or some key performance indicators for our business. And part of that KPI would be an understanding of our margin, perhaps our wages costs, our labor costs, etc. But, I think the overall thing, is to keep it really, really simple and not get distracted and really just working slowly in setting everything up properly from the beginning. It's just foundational stuff, which I think is often overlooked.
Okay. And Alvin, when we talk about KPIs, I was like looking at you and thinking about the extent to which we could complicate our reading of KPIs. Sometimes
Totally.
we look at building like connections or interactions between several elements to say like, yeah, you see, I am going up because I have done this, or I am going down because I have done. Where's the error in that? How can we simplify our reading, and how can we look at realistic readings of our numbers?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is a common thing, and it looks like you've seen this as well. I did it. A lot of my clients, but if we are tracking our KPIs, we are overcomplicating it, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing is, we just got to keep everything really, really simple. And in our industry, in the retail industry, there are probably, and I recommend we don't track more than 6 to 8 KPIs in our business.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly one of the most important ones, I think, for retail is, which I would ask every retailer to consider, is our average sale per client or average dollar sale, or however you call it in what part of the world you are. It's basically, what your average basket size is, because tracking that KPI and then starting to improve it will give you the biggest bang for your buck on improving your cash flow and profitability. Because quite often, when we start to increase our average basket size or average sale per customer, it involves very little marketing, and it involves using the resources we already have in our business. And that is understanding what our clients want and what else we can cross-sell and upsell with them. We've already got the products and we already have the team. So I think that's one of the key things that we need to think about, is have on our KPIs. And the last point I wanted to make about KPIs, you mentioned, so, I'm all about ensuring that the business owner can step back from the day-to-day running of their business. So in that respect, I always ensure that the KPIs are really, really simple and easily trackable, because it's going to be our team that are going to be reporting the KPIs to us. So if you make it overly complicated, unless you've got the point of sale system in place to support that, if you're going to be, in Paris eating croissants and your team are checking in with you, you just want to make it really, really simple for them to do that.
Okay. Like the croissant that you were eating last week.
That's right.
I saw that, Alvin.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Glad you like it. And so we talked about entrepreneurs. Are there other ways that managers in larger department stores or larger retail structures that they look at in terms of their readings? And are there different readings to different departments providing different services?
100%. Yeah, so each department manager is really got to understand, obviously what they're looking after on a store level. And you're right, every department has obviously got different products and services. And we want to really understand that we're optimizing profitability for each. If you're a store manager, you're probably not looking at cash flow so much, but you definitely should be looking at the profitability of your department or category that you're looking after and ensuring that we're profitable. Now, as a manager, I've had managers run my stores before, and they don't necessarily get into the financials, but it's really about understanding through your point of sale system and just making sure that we have the basic housekeeping done, making sure the integrity of our point of sale system is spot on. If we are entering in manual invoices, are our team members entering it in correctly? If we're downloading from the supplier onto our point of sale system, are the cost prices correct? Because all those things can skew our results, all the basic stuff. And this is what I think it's really important for, a retail manager or a manager of a particular department to pay attention to.
Okay, thank you. My final question would be, and I don't know if it's the right question to ask. However, it has been on my mind. If we're talking about profitability, is it something related to a timely issue? Does profitability has to be calculated now and today? Because most of the actions that marketers do and that financial departments hate is doing an action today that will have a sales reaction maybe a week or a month later. So how can we make peace between these two departments, and how, to what extent marketing and communications are related to those profitability aspects of the business?
Yes, this happens all the time, certainly with larger retailers where they do have a marketing department. I would always say we should always strive for profitability first, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, I understand that there are going to be certain initiatives that we need to invest in that'll drive profitability later on. And certainly I feel, and this is based on my experience of working with clients, like we don't even get to that point yet until we get the fundamentals right. So we need to ensure that we're profitable. We've got this machine set up, the cogs are turning, our cash flow is nice and high. Because, that's what every business owner comes to me and says, I want to try this marketing strategy. I want to try that marketing strategy. And look, I know it's not going to give me results till later. But I think before we can go down that road, we want to ensure that we have a stable, profitable, highly cash liquid baseline before we go down that road. So I'm not opposed to it. I think we just need to set the foundations up correctly.
Right. Okay. Thank you. For that. Alvin, I believe that we have covered all of the themes that I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to ask now if you have closing comments or final thoughts that could help people understand more about their profitability.
Absolutely. I think the biggest tip, the two biggest tips I can give you is try not to overcomplicate it. Keep it really, really simple in terms of understanding your numbers. And I think, the final part is really take the time to understand as an independent retail business owner, or as an independent business owner, really, what you want out of life, what your values are, what do you want this business to provide. And it's only then that I believe, this whole journey of owning a business gets really, really interesting, because that's really what can drive your business forward and you as an individual forward,
Right. And talking about that, human beings tend to overcomplicate things.
We do. And especially in the age that we're living in now with so much technology, and, the glorified startup is all technology based, and there's so many complex things happening around the world. And I think it's so easy to get distracted, obviously, with all the devices that we're going around. So I think simplicity is key.
And, Alvin, talking about simplicity, I've worked with so many people who were shocked when we presented to them reports that are smaller and not condensed and straight to the point. And sometimes I feel that we are expected to do more and to fluff our reports to look thicker and bigger, whereas the answers are just right there on the first page. So I hope that everyone will be convinced.
I hope so too.
How retailers should oversimplify and look at the basics and essentials. Thank you so
100%.
much, Alvin, for this beautiful conversation. I'm really glad that we managed to do it. and hopefully
Thank you
we
so
do
much for
other
having me.
live soon. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. have a
awesome.
have a nice evening.
Thank
And
you.
thank you. And for all those who joined us a little bit later, as usual, I'll be directly uploading the chat on IGTV and later on YouTube. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, Alvin, and have a nice evening. Bye bye.
Bye.